Hello. The Parliamentary Assembly of the Mediterranean Sea was established in order to create a better political, economic and cultural environment in addition to good living conditions for the citizens of the Mediterranean Sea. This would be achieved through consolidating trust among Mediterranean states, ensuring safety, regional stability and peace, and unifying efforts. Syria is a Mediterranean state. Its citizens are suffering from terrorism, economic blockade, and a worsening humanitarian situation. What has the Parliamentary Assembly done in light of this issue, and what are its future steps? We are going to answer these questions and many other questions with Mr. Sergei Beiatzi, the Secretary General of the Parliamentary Assembly. Mr. Sergei, hello and welcome.
Good evening.
First, I would like to ask you, you have shown the readiness of the Assembly to provide full support to the Syrian People's Assembly's efforts in the national reconciliation, solving the crisis politically, and fighting terrorism. Let's start with fighting terrorism. How are you going to help Syria in this?
Listen, Syria is a founding member of our Assembly. From the very beginning has been very, very active. And Syria is not the only crisis that the Parliamentary Assembly has been dealing with. Look what is happening in our Mediterranean, what has happened in Tunisia with the transition, the revolution in Egypt, the ongoing crisis in Libya. So our role is to work with all our member states in order to have the collective support of all the countries of the region and find the best support we can provide to them to deal with the issues, and also mobilize the external support which may be required, being this support humanitarian, political, or to open door for discussion. For what the specific case of Syria is concerned, I remember we started working with Syria from the very beginning. I was here in 2013, in June, for a meeting with the Parliament and with the authorities, and myself, I went a couple of years ago specifically to Ecuador, to Quito, on the occasion of a meeting of the Interparliamentary Union, to meet with the delegation of Syria and open a discussion on how we can help them. Since Quito, I can tell you we have had excellent, very fruitful relation with the President of the Parliament, the member of the Foreign Relations Committee, and with the government at all levels. And also, of course, with the United Nations for what concerns the humanitarian assistance and the political negotiations. This is for us fundamental. It is the use of the parliamentary diplomacy in support of the traditional diplomacy, or when the traditional diplomacy has a problem. The diplomat may not meet because of government have a certain position, but the parliamentarian can continue to meet, discuss, and make certain difficult situation easier to manage. We have had many cases on that, including what is emblematic for our region. For instance, the dialogue between Palestine and Israel, where the two continue to meet around our table, which is fundamental. You were asking about the fight to terrorism, yes, which is extremely important for Syria, for the neighboring countries, for all our region. We have seen what has happened with the terrorist attack in Paris, in Tunis, the threats which may have in Australia, yes, in Italy, or in other countries. It is important that there is a coordinated and coherent effort. Because if you leave door gap open between the different countries, it's easy for the terrorists to seek refuge. It is very important, I would put the accent, on the action by the UN Security Council. On 24 September, in New York, on the margin of General Assembly, there was a special meeting of Security Council, which was exceptionally led by President Obama. And in that meeting, the Security Council adopted a resolution which is very strict, under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter, which means countries are obliged to enforce it, to respect it. And this resolution focused on terrorism and on the role of terrorist foreign fighters. And it's clear that the situation of Iraq and Syria is in the background of this resolution. And this resolution asks countries to implement a number of measures to prevent the travel of foreign fighters from the country of origin to this region, from them to operate in the region, and then also how to avoid terrorist action once they are back. So this resolution 2178 is fundamental. Where comes the role of our assembly in this resolution? There is a role for parliamentarians. There is a role for those who have to make sure that the law of country provide the kind of support, the kind of cooperation which is required. So after this resolution, we had a meeting in New York, the delegation of our parliamentary assembly, which was led by the Italian parliament in that time, by President Amoruso, with the chair of the Counterterrorism Committee of the Security Council, the ambassador of Lithuania. And after that, we met with the officers of the United Nations responsible as a secretariat to assist the Security Council in this implementation. From that meeting has started a very fruitful cooperation where the United Nations, the European Commission, and PAM together are organizing a number of meetings, but it's really like training session where you exchange experiences, lessons learned, to see if the law of a country are adapted, need to be modified to new scenarios for which maybe the country was not prepared, and how is important the cooperation between parliamentarians and, for instance, the government and the judges and the security service of a country. One of the concerns was how to make sure that there is a good oversight by parliamentarians on security services to avoid abuse of human rights. But going at the core of the mission to fight terrorism and foreign fighters in particular, I can tell you that we have already organized a few months ago, at the end of February, in Rome, hosted by the Italian Parliament, a specific meeting of the United Nations with us and the European Commission dedicated to member of parliaments from Maghreb, Mauritania, Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia and Libya, where these issues were discussed with emphasis on those countries, because we know that many of foreign fighters come from that region. There will be another big meeting for all our member states, including the Middle East, the Balkans, and European countries, in the beginning of October in Bucharest, hosted by the Parliament of Romania, where we will address in this wider forum the same issues and make sure that this country are fully familiar with the elements of this resolution and to implement them. But also what we are doing is not only necessary that, for instance, the Parliament of Morocco, which by the way is a very advanced law on this, is aware of the provision, but we have to ensure that there is coherence and complementarity between Morocco and the neighboring countries, south-south, south-north, so that we had, on the occasion of the Rome meeting, for instance, the former Minister of Justice of Portugal. The President of the Italian Senate is a senior judge himself, and he came to the meeting so that we can exchange lessons learned, experiences, and build those necessary bridges to ensure that the cooperation is effective. So we are implementing this. I know from the Officer of the United Nations that this is a 5-year plan. You need really to continue to insist. At the same time, the day before yesterday, in Brussels, the European Commission has adopted a 10 million euros program to fight terrorism and to fight extremism, but also to look at the root causes of that, especially for what Europe is concerned. So there is a lot of cooperation going on. There is a lot of attention, especially now after the terrorist attack in Paris, that people in Europe have taken conscience that what is happening in terrorism is not only what we see on television in Iraq or Syria, but is also something that is very true as a danger, as an hazard for Europeans.
I want to ask you about the Saudi, Qatari, and Turkish role. It is a well-known fact that they are interfering in the crisis in Syria, and they are playing a very main role in it. Why aren't they being stopped? Why isn't anyone trying to stop them?
I was at a number of meetings where this has been mentioned. It's clear that you have different foreign policy, different political sensitivity from one country to the other one. But I know, for instance, that Saudi Arabia itself, not long ago, has adopted a law to block Saudis from traveling, preventing them from traveling to Iraq, to Syria, and to join the foreign fighters.
But do you think that they are succeeding in that?
Well, I'm not an expert in that, but I can tell you that it is indeed an obligation, a must of the international community to travel together, because the problem that today is in Syria and Iraq, tomorrow can be in another country. So we have to really fight in a homogeneous, coherent way terrorism, because terrorism one day blows in one direction, the other day in the other direction. So I think it's in the common interest to have a truly coalition of countries to fight terrorism. And also, it was interesting, I was in Moscow in May with the delegation of parliamentarians from Italy, from Palestine, from Monaco, from Morocco, from Syria to Moscow. How we have to help the political process, and we have to make very clear distinction between what is terrorism, what is political opposition in any country. And that's where we have to work at isolating the terrorist element.
Actually, it is a well-known fact that oil is being smuggled from Syria to Turkey. Artifacts are being stolen. The world knows this. How can this be stopped?
Well, I believe that under the provision of these resolutions, now there are all the instruments of international law, of the international community. It has been mentioned in a number of meetings that the terrorists are financing themselves through the most strange activities, including what is the illegal trade of stolen archaeological artifacts, or through other part of mechanical pieces from industry and so on. So I think it is part of the international effort in the implementation of Resolution 2178 to block all those activities which fund the terrorism. We know, for instance, that Daesh took a lot of money when they conquered Mosul, in the central bank of Mosul. There were some $400 million. So we have to look at all those elements, and if we want to be effective, take the appropriate measure to ensure that there is no funding for terrorist activities. And the terrorist activities are not necessarily funded through this. It was a big surprise. This is an information which I saw on the international television, that those terrorists who conducted the terrorist attack in Paris didn't get any money from abroad. They had a little loan from a local bank. So you see, we have to look at, in a very different and creative approach, how we can tackle the fight of terrorism under this form, and this is a terrorism that is totally different from what we have experienced in the past.
Mm-hmm. Now, France refused the participation of Syria in the Assembly's meeting, although Syria is a member state, and although the Syrian crisis is on the top of the agenda of the meeting. How is that right?
Well, that is not right according to our rules. And I can tell you that the president of PAM was very loud and very clear, and he also wrote a formal letter of protest to the ambassador of France in Rome.
The UN envoy is going to start his consultative meetings with all sides and states concerned. Are you hopeful for Geneva 3?
We must be hopeful, because if we lose hope, it will be terrible for all of us. I wish that Staffan de Mistura has all the luck and the support he requires. If you remember some statement by those who preceded him, there was a serious concern about how I can carry on this message, this very difficult task, if I do not have the support of the international community, if I do not have the support of the Security Council. That's why what Staffan de Mistura is doing is extremely important, and we have to support him. We have to encourage him, and we have to provide all the weight of the goodwill for him to succeed.
Mm-hmm. One of the Parliamentary Assembly of Mediterranean Sea's goals is to ensure a better living conditions for the citizens of its member states. What about the Syrian citizens?
They deserve all the support. They deserve to live in peace.
How are you going to support them?
Well, through a number of measures. I had a meeting today with the delegate from the United Nations, from the Russian embassy, from other members of the government, the foreign committee of the Syrian parliament. To support peace in Syria is a must. If you don't have stability, if you don't have economic growth, you continue to supply fertile ground for terrorism and for violence. So I believe that if all of us, we work together at ensuring a minimum improvement of standard for the people of Syria, we will not contribute to the peace process. The support to the people goes hand in hand with the peace process. This is very true for Libya. I remember we had a meeting in Tunisia about 1.5 years ago when there was an unstable situation before the very positive reform of the constitutional process went on. And we said, if we don't create jobs, people will be in the street. We have to give the dignity to the people, to the family, to live, to go to school, to work, to have a decent life, because this is a basic instrument for peace. And also, in some of the discussion we had today, we were talking about sanction. We know from 20 years of experience that sanction hit the people of a country.
Staying in this field, the Syrian government has endured the heaviest burden of ensuring or securing shelters for DPs. What has the Assembly done in this regard, and what are its future steps?
I can tell you that one of our main tasks is to support, to facilitate humanitarian assistance. Mm-hmm. This is a special case. Syria is the worst crisis that I think the Western world has experienced since World War II. We have millions of people displaced. It's not a short displacement. It's not an earthquake that you go out, you live in a tent for a few months until your house is rebuilt. We are talking of hosting, assisting, feeding, providing medical assistance and education for millions of people, family, women and children. We know from the record, and the officer of the United Nations have confirmed to me, more than 80% of the burden for what concerns the territory of Syria is shouldered by the government of Syria, which is making an enormous effort to assist these people. And at the same time, you have people who have crossed the border, who are in Lebanon, in Jordan, in Turkey. The head of the United Nations humanitarian operation in Syria told me this morning that only the United Nations, for their portion of help to complement what the government is doing, have requested $2.9 billion for 2015. Half of that is for food. So you see how big is the effort and why our parliament, the international community in general, has to support humanitarian assistance, be given by the government of Syria, the Red Crescent Movement, the United Nations, and all the other organizations which are able to do that. We have never experienced a crisis of this dimension.
Yes. Mr. Piazza, how do you evaluate your visit to Syria?
Very good. It is very positive. With my colleagues, we had very positive, constructive meetings with the President of the Parliament, the Minister of Foreign Affairs, the Deputy Prime Ministers, the members of the Foreign Affairs Committee and the Reconciliation Committee, and other meetings outside with the United Nations and other diplomats. This is very, very important for us because as Parliament, our reports are independent. So we will put together the information we have received, the messages we have received, and then we will pass it through our own constituency, our member state, our parliament, and to other partner organizations, but we will share it also with the United Nations, the Arab League, the European institutions, in order to contribute through parliamentary diplomacy to the overall effort to have a common position, to really to get the goodwill and the support of international community to bring peace to Syria.
Thank you. Finally, I want to ask you, do you see a solution for the Syrian crisis in the near future?
We must have hope for that, because 5 years war is too long. Too many people have died. Too many people are suffering. And this is not what a civilized world is for.
Thank you very much for being with us. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for watching us, and goodbye.